So welcome back to the Real Football Show. I'm Ryan Lam. Today we have a jam-packed pod for you, especially considering this will probably go up in segments to save my exporting time. I'm Ryan Lam, the host, and today with me is Madeline Lapreziosa and also Sam Coffey. You guys have both been here, so let's just get straight into it because the first thing we are contending on is the transfer frenzy of women's soccer, considering a lot of NWSL players and also college players are actually going to Europe to play, especially in this season. Let's start with probably one of the bigger ones, I would say, apart from City, because Manchester has been doing a huge doing huge deals in terms of establishing their women's team. Christen Press, Tobin Heath to Manchester United. So, for me, I'm a United fan, and I'm used to United being, a little bit up and down with their transfers, and they did take way longer than I expected to complete those deals. So let's go to Madeline first. What do you think about this transfer and how it could impact the overall squad and team's development?
Well, obviously, it's a huge signing and really big for the WSL to have two American players, two very well-known American players in Christen Press and Tobin Heath. And I think especially for Manchester United, since haven't really been around for too long. So for them to kind of have that big signing, that's just huge for the club, and they're obviously going to bring a lot on the field.
All right, Sam, what you got on this deal?
I love it. I love it from both the players. I love it from the club. I think the WSL is growing a ton, which is really exciting. It's obviously been, one of the premier leagues in Europe. And I love that American players are now starting to venture out. I feel like we saw some kind of since around 2015, like Carly Lloyd going to City, Heather O'Reilly going to Arsenal. I'm a little disappointed none of them are going to Arsenal. That is definitely tough. They gotta get on that. But I love this move. I think it's awesome, and I think it's good that they're venturing out and taking that opportunity to go and experience something different.
Of course, I feel like this team still needs work. Of course, it's a lot of young players. Even looking at their squad right now, when someone like Leah Golden isn't playing, it's like Ella Toon and Lauren James, and those are even when you look at the squad, it's 18, 19-year-olds all along, and even in the interviews they're talking about how they could be in a mentorship role, which of course they have the experience and all that, but they're kind of at a level where everyone's kind of just really good, and it might be something different for them to take up. So this is definitely interesting to look, and I would say there are definitely roster spots to contend with. They could, of course, walk in and start, but then, the team has been playing pretty well, especially in the offensive side, and maybe there's some moving pieces around, and that's for Casey Stoney, the head coach and the manager, to sort out. So I feel like the big news is the abundance of news surrounds United and City, which we will touch on City later as well. But then the single biggest news is probably Alex Morgan going to the Spurs, considering her impact and also her just influence in the women's soccer game, and also in general, she's a really big name going to Spurs, which is, if you would consider Chelsea, Arsenal, City, and then United finished around fourth last season, Spurs is definitely not currently in those top clubs. So Sam, let's go with you. Alex Morgan, of course, everyone knows that name. What do you think she could do for Spurs in terms of in the club, but then also outside of the club, trying to boost the game?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, because I think there was definitely a moment of interesting choice from her in going there. I think they're definitely rebuilding, and I watched them play Arsenal, and obviously they're just such a force. It's so hard to beat the Arsenal women, but they definitely have a lot of work to do. I think she will be a huge catalyst in that, and that she can definitely be a player that can help begin that change. I think it's a challenge for her. That I think could be that she can, immediately bring back into, the full team squad, as well as when she decides to go back to Orlando. I think like you said, it's an interesting move. She's not, just going to like a powerhouse team. I think she's taking on a challenge, and I'm excited to see how she can do there.
So Madeline, this is a very, I don't want to say tricky, but it's a very interesting timing, especially for this transfer. Of course, Alex Morgan just came off a really long break from her pregnancy for one, and she has been saying that she wants to get back into the U.S. women's national team setup as quickly as possible. Spurs, though, might not be the top team to consider when you think about she played for Lyon. So, what do you make of this transfer, especially the timing?
I think it's a really great opportunity for her to get back in a competitive environment after not playing for so long. And, as you said, she played in Lyon before, the best team in the world. So, and it just shows how ambitious she is since, after not playing for a while, she will go abroad. I think, it'll definitely be a good opportunity for her to get back in with the national team with the Olympics next year.
Mm-hmm. Now, let's move on to another top team that we were talking about mentioning, of course. Manchester City also did some business in the NWSL realm, plucking Sam Mewis from North Carolina and also Rose Lavelle from Washington, but she was then traded to Utah. So let's go back to Sam. Of course, these are two, I would say, younger players to break into the national. Of course, if you have to break into the national team, you're really good. But they're of the younger crop. Comparing them to Lloyd and Rapinoe, those are the more elder statesmen. Alex Morgan, Tobin, and Christen, of course, they're a little bit more toward the 30s. So, what do you think? It's a different point in their career, but then, of course, the decision of going abroad again.
Yeah, I think, again, similar to what we were talking about with both Alex Morgan and Tobin Heath and Christen Press, I think it's a great move for them. Again, like you said, they are young, and I don't think that they've experienced the international game in this way, at least yet in their career. I could be wrong. But I think City is obviously a club with an incredible reputation on both the men and women's sides. And I think it's just a great opportunity for them to experience a different style of play, to add different elements into their game. And I think the fact that they are younger players just makes that even better and presents to them an even greater opportunity.
Mm-hmm. Back to you, Madeline, because this is, of course, the first domino to fall. But then also, when you talk about Man City, it has to be about their ambitions right now, and like Sam said, their reputation. In this transfer window, they brought in the likes of Alex Greenwood and Lucy Bronze. Both could start for the Lionesses, and now, of course, Sam Mewis and also Rose Lavelle. So, how do you think they could shape up a challenge toward, of course, Arsenal and Chelsea in the WSL?
I think it's going to be an interesting battle to see who's going to come out on top in the WSL. And Manchester City, we know they're ambitious on the men's side and on the women's side now. So I think, it's just a continuation of that, and they're definitely going to put up a fight.
Yeah, and considering we haven't touched on this because it's kind of out of our US scope, but then Chelsea has been bringing in players like Sam Kerr earlier in the year, and also Pernille Harder toward the latter part of the season, and that could really amp up their challenge toward Arsenal. But personally, Arsenal is still, I feel the best team, especially with their Dutch core, and but it will be a really interesting season to watch for the WSL. So let's wrap up some of the ends here with college players now. Of course, the two of them that I have on the dock is Grace Fisk, who started with Penn State, went to South Carolina, I believe, and also Alessia Russo, who a stalwart for North Carolina, one of the top programs in college soccer in general. They both went back to the UK, with Fisk going to West Ham after 4 years, but then Russo going to Manchester United after 3 years in college. So, Sam, what do you make of that kind of transfer and decision and timing, especially with Russo foregoing her last year of eligibility, but then also, they're both straight into the Lionesses squad a couple of weeks ago?
Yeah, I think for them it makes complete sense, honestly, especially as English players. I've played against them both, and they're both awesome. They're both really good, and again, because the fact that they are English, that they have been called up to the full English squad, I think it makes the most sense, for them to just go ahead and forego that final year. As tough, I think, as that was a decision for both of them. I think it ultimately made the most sense, just like with their citizenship, with their connections to some of these clubs. I think it was a great move, and again, just like the best option for them, I'd say.
Mm-hmm. And finally, the last point we have here is there are players that take short-term deals in every season, and you look at some of the, especially rookies in the NWSL. Madeline, this question goes to you because, I would say Sky Blue as an example with Kaylee Real and Evelyn Vienne both going to Paris FC, and this is a interesting point of contention because in this time with the NWSL Fall Series, they would actually have more, opportunity to perform with some of the players like opting in and out, some of the players already going overseas. So what do you think of their decisions of them going overseas rather than staying and playing with their NWSL teams?
I think it's a great decision, and for a lot of reasons. If you can leave the U.S. right now, why not? So, especially with the fall series, since it's like only a few games and not much experience you're going to get, if you're able to go overseas and play, for a few months in a regular season, then it's a great decision, especially with the French league, because I am a huge fan of French football. So I was very excited to hear that players are moving to the French league.
Yeah. So Sam, finally, with kind of the same scope with players going, a lot of like in a regular season which we don't know when it could, like everything could go back to regular. You see players play the NWSL and then go over to the European leagues, possibly even with players like Emily Sonnet and all of them taking short-term deals. So it's kind of been in contention with, especially with women's sports. When you look at stuff like WNBA, players basically have to play year-round, and like the seasons are shorter, but they have to play year-round. And like, how would it affect you as an athlete to, just have that rigorous schedule and then having to adapt to both sides of things?
I mean, I think it's definitely something that is presented as a challenge, but especially kind of like you were alluding to, Madeline, the climate in the country right now, just with the virus, with the lack of games. Honestly, I sort of see it as if you have the opportunity to go and to experience football culture abroad, why not? Why not? Obviously, there are reasons with the pandemic, but if that opportunity presents itself, I think it's one that should be taken, especially by these younger players who are still starting out their professional careers and are going to get minutes and playing time and new experiences, and then eventually come back to the United States just a better version of themselves, and having that international experience that they wouldn't have otherwise. So again, that's kind of like the question in my mind is like, why wouldn't you just take that opportunity and make the most of it and go experience something different, I guess.
Mm-hmm. So this wraps up on our segment talking about some of the international transfer early on with NWSL and WSL in college and whatnot. We'll be back soon with another segment on the NWSL Fall Series and some of the logistics stuff that the NWSL has to deal with, especially in this area. We'll be back soon.